What's up, everyone out there? This your boy Ceddy of Ceddy Knows Tech, and today we're going to talk about how to convert your Windows 10 desktop or laptop computer into an awesome, and in my inner rock, an awesome development environment. So, for a long time now, a lot of developers just kind of wrote off Windows as a system that you can use for development. And if you do a quick search on like Google, for instance, and so forth, you will see that there's all kind of articles why do most professional programmers prefer Mac or even Linux, and these articles range from everything talking about, how Microsoft want to control their desktop systems to terminal. And I believe terminal, in my opinion, is probably one of the main reasons why things just were so difficult to program back in the day on Windows, because Microsoft just didn't supply or have a valid terminal environment that could realistically meet the needs of developers and the things that we do in terminal, which is a lot. So I believe those days are over now. Microsoft has, over the past about 5 years or so, Microsoft has really stepped their game up and creating platforms and packages and pieces of software that really promote development for all systems and all types of project types and so forth in Windows. A lot of that is now centered around what is called WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux. The introduction of Visual Studio Code and the introduction also of Terminal for Windows, which allows you to kind of control and manage all your shell environments under one application. WSL allows you to run Linux side by side in harmony with Windows, so that you can do development on both sides of the house, for maybe Windows for .NET development and things of that nature, and then you use Linux for basically everything else, because it's a full Linux install that runs smoothly with Windows. So I just think Microsoft has really stepped their game up, but there's still a lot of confusion out there on how do I set this environment up properly for all this, especially with now the introduction of WSL 2 that just got introduced with the Microsoft 2004 update. And like I said, it's not 2004 isn't the year, but it's just Microsoft numbering system. But it's called the 2004 update, which was like the May 10th update. But getting all that stood up properly, how do I go about getting all that stood up and so forth? That's what I'm here for today. So we're going to look at how to step by step, in a very easy manner, how to get your laptop stood up for development of all the project types that you might want to program in and develop in. We're going to do that right now and take a look at that in its entirety. So this video might be a little longer than usual, but hang in there. My goal is to make a video that kind of covers all the basis of development for WSL and how to get all that stood up properly. So we're going to go ahead and go through that. But before we do that, cue my intro. This is my Windows 10 laptop here. This is my Windows laptop that I do a lot of my development on for like .NET, things like that. What I've done for this particular demo is I had to clean up some stuff. So what I actually did was did a fresh install of Windows 10, the 2004 update, not the year 2004, but it's Microsoft's update. Latest update is called the 2004 update. Yeah, it's Microsoft's infamous numbering system, but you want to make sure that you have that installed, because without that, none of this stuff is going to work with WSL2, because the 2004 update is what introduced the WSL2 features and so forth into the stable, or I guess consumer version of Windows 10, so that you're not having to use the fast or slow rings to kind of get these features. The way that you can check that you have the correct feature, the correct version, is simply hit the Windows key and just type in WinVer, WINVER. And when you do that, you will see that I have Windows 10, and you'll see the version, the 2004 update version installed. So that is a must. You must have that version installed for any of this to work. If you don't have it, or your computer has not received that update yet, just stop this video now, go back and
try to pull that version into your computer, so that you can have the latest and greatest version, at least at the time it's recording, the latest and greatest version of Windows 10, which is a 2004 update on your computer. And it doesn't hurt to go ahead and also make sure that you have all the latest updates from Microsoft, just regular patches and things installed as well. You know, Microsoft just likes it when we start with the latest and greatest, and then we just go from there. So the way this is going to work, we're going to basically start with installing WSL2, getting that configured and stood up, installing the distro of Linux. I'll be installing Ubuntu, was it 2004, LTS, that's from the Microsoft Store. And once we do that, then we can install some things such as Node and Docker. That's a big development platform that a lot of developers use. So, and getting all that kind of coordinated and working with WSL2 so that you can actually utilize things such as Docker on both sides of the house, on the Windows side and as well as inside the Linux environment from WSL. So let's get started.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to get WSL installed by first getting all the prerequisite features and things turned on inside of your Windows install so that you can enable WSL. The way we're going to do that is by first hitting the Windows key and just type in turn, and when you do that you should get a little option, I guess you could say, pop up saying turn Windows features on and off. So basically that's, you can also go to control panel to get that done, but if you just type turn, and usually it comes right up for you. So go ahead and click this option, and what this is going to do is going to bring up some options of things that you can have turned on and off. You can turn things on that's not on and turn things off that you don't want no more or whatever. But in particular, we're looking for two things. We want one, this option here where it says virtual machine platform. We want to make sure that box is indeed checked. So you want that one checked. And you want to go down a little further and you'll see Windows subsystem for Linux. You want to make sure that box is indeed checked. So those are the two things you do want to get to make sure they're checked. And when you hit OK, it's going to go out there, kind of gather up all these features and get them applied to your system so that you can get WSL installed. This will require a system reboot. So I'm gonna pause the video right here and allow my computer to reboot, and we'll resume after this reboot takes place. Now that we have all the prerequisites and all the files and packages installed on our machine to run WSL, as well as we literally now have WSL installed on our machine, we can now go ahead and decide on a distro of Linux that we want to run. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and install Ubuntu 20.04 LTS for my system. But the way you do that is fairly simple. We just simply go out to your Windows Store and in search, you can search for, just type in Linux. And what's going to happen, you're going to get back a bunch of different Linux distros that you can install under WSL2. And you have everything from like Ubuntu to SUSE to Debian, all kind of. You have quite a few of them in here. I tend to go with the latest LTS from Ubuntu 20.04, and so that we just kind of click on that and just hit install. And when you do that, it's going to kind of do like if you purchase or download any system from the App Store. It's going to go out there, it's going to grab it, it's going to download it to your computer and start to install it. It's not a full install yet, but it starts to install it. So let's just wait a second while my computer downloads this to download Ubuntu 20.04 to my computer. And you can run multiple versions of Linux under WSL, or WSL2 I should say. You can, let's say if you want to run 18.04 and you want to run 20.04, and maybe you want to run was it Debian? You can download that. as well as SUSE. If you want to download, you can download as many as you like, and they will run under their own environment. So you're not stuck with just one particular, distro of Linux, but you can download multiple versions and run them on your computer. Depending on what your use case is, that's completely possible. But in my case, I'm just going to download one. I'm just going to download Ubuntu 20.04, and once that download is finished, you should now see in your, depending on how you got your computer set up, under recently added, you should see now option for Ubuntu 20.04. So I'm just going to kind of drag this down here and link it to my taskbar. And now the only thing you gotta do now, just click it. And when you click it for the first time, it may take a few minutes to kind of get everything lined up and installed properly. It's installing the download into WSL and get everything ready for you. When it finishes, it's going to ask you to create a Linux username and to add a username or Linux account, I should say. So it's going to ask you for a username and password, and then you got to confirm your password, and then you're good to go. So as you can see here, it's asking me for a new Linux username, and I just usually go with my name, Cedric Gaines, and it's going to ask you for a password. So just type in the password that you want, and then it wants you to confirm that password. And once it's finished, it'll kind of finalize everything, and boom, you can now see that you have Ubuntu fully installed here. From here, you can actually run different commands like clear, ls, different Linux commands, and so forth. So now you actually have a full working version of Linux on your desktop of Windows, and the two are working, side by side in harmony, which is awesome as a developer, because it allows you to, have our Windows laptops for things like, if you want a good gaming laptop, or you want a laptop that does certain things, like I do .NET development and I like to game. You can't really do that with Mac, because Mac is not, while it's an awesome machine, they're not gaming machines. That's more of a Windows laptop thing, but it allows you to kind of have a laptop that you can develop in now utilizing Linux, instead of trying to install everything through Windows, and that's a hot mess at times. But so now you can actually do some things, such as one of the first things I recommend you do is go ahead and do updates and upgrades. So you can say sudo app, type get update. It's going to ask you for that password that you just used a few seconds ago, and it's going to go out there and update everything. This is just like if you was administering a Linux computer or a Linux server. You want to do your updates and upgrades, periodically, to make sure that you have the latest and greatest from the vendor, for security patches and just updates, period. Now you see that my update is complete. So what I'm gonna do now is just hit the up key, and then I just type upgrade, and yes, hit yes, Y, so that you can accept, that additional space that's going to take up. And it's going to go out there and it's going to now upgrade your install of Linux, and with all the latest and greatest, features and packages and just things like that from the vendor. And this may take a few minutes, depend on, how up to date the distro from the Windows Store is from when you download it, and then when you run these updates and upgrades, it might have been a little time that passed, but usually they're pretty quick. And as you can see, everything is now finished. So the next step I want to do is, let's go back to the Windows Store real quick and download another terminal that I think you will like to manage all your environments that you might now have on your computer, because you might have PowerShell, you got the standard CMD command prompt from Windows. You now have a version of Linux on your machine. So instead of having all these little terminals for each one of these areas, let's just download one from Microsoft that Microsoft created called this terminal, that we can use to kind of control all this. So once again, let's go back to the Microsoft Store, go to search, and just type in terminal and just Windows Terminal. And once it comes up, this is a kind of open source free product that Microsoft is giving to developers to, that integrates cleanly with WSL, command prompt, PowerShell, whatever you have. If you got other, if you have other environments on your machine, such as maybe instead of 2004, maybe you got SUSE or things like that installed, it's going to allow you to manage all those environments seamlessly right from here. So basically, just like any other app, you just kind of hit install. It's going to, get it all ready for you and download it to your computer. It might take a few seconds depending on the speed of your machine. And you can go ahead and close that out. I'm gonna go ahead and close this window out because I'm actually going to control this environment from that program we just downloaded. And inside, like I said, inside your recently added setup, you should see something called Windows Terminal. I'm gonna attach that to my taskbar here as well. And when I click here, you should see everything just pop up nice and neat. It's depending on how you get it all set up, it should default to, I guess, PowerShell. So if you're doing some PowerShell scripting or PowerShell commands, you can run PowerShell. But the cool thing about this is that you can run multiple tabs and each one be a different environment. And like, for instance, right now, this is PowerShell. And if I click this drop down, you will see now all of the different environments that I have on my machine. I now have a way to get to them easily without having to go into command prompt and all the different areas to try to find these icons and applications to run them. So in this case, I got PowerShell, my command prompt. Because we installed Ubuntu 2004, I have that environment as well as like the Azure Cloud Shell and things like that. So I can come here to Ubuntu, for instance, and boom, now I'm in my environment. I can run like Linux commands, so like clear, or sorry, clear, but like htop. I think I might have to install that. I might have to install that first. Yeah, I think I might have to install that first. But you can actually run all your Linux commands from here. No problem. Right now, you can see that I'm attached to my C drive right now. But if I go like CD, now this is now I'm inside the Linux environment, because if I say pwd, you can see that I'm at home and under my my Linux account. So what we have done now, we got WSL installed. We downloaded a distro of Linux. We got that installed and stood up and updated. We downloaded the terminal so that we can kind of control all these environments under one application. The next thing I want to do is let's go ahead and install Node. So now let's go ahead and take a look at installing Node in WSL, so that you can use that for your development. As you all know, Node is kind of used for a lot of reasons, for a lot of different projects and project types. And we also use Node, or I should say NPM, for Node Package Manager, so that we can NPM packages into our projects and so forth, NPM and NPX. So Node is probably not, I ain't gonna say the most, because that depends on what you're developing, but it's definitely an important component to have in your development environment. And there's different ways to install Node, but I like using something called NVM, Node Version Manager. And if you go out to the internet and Google NVM, one of the first entries you should see is a GitHub project here for NVM. And you just kind of click on that link, and what you're going to be taken to is the GitHub project for it, repository for it. And installing it is pretty straightforward. You can either use curl or wget. I use curl, and you just kind of grab this command right here and copy it, and you go into your terminal and you paste it and hit enter. And what it's going to do is going to go out there and it's going to basically download NVM into your computer, onto your computer. Now from here, now what you need to do, you do need to close everything out real quick. Just close it all out once it's fully downloaded, and then you can actually reopen it. And I'm gonna go ahead and once again, I'm just gonna open up another Ubuntu shell, and I should be able to test now that NVM is installed if I just type NVM -- version. As you can see, I do have it installed, but if I type in node -- version, you know, it doesn't come back. It's like node is not found. So you probably saying, Cedric, I thought we downloaded NVM so we can have node. NVM is the node version manager. It allows you to download multiple versions of node and run them depending on what you want, because you know some people might have a use case, or some developers say have a use case where they need a particular version of node, as well as maybe they want the latest version, the feature-rich version of node, and so forth. NVM allows you to do that, and basically it's easy to configure. So to install node itself with NVM, you just simply say NVM install node, and what's that going to do is like whatever's the latest and greatest out there, it's going to download that version into your system. So if I say that, you know, NVM install node, it's going to go out there. It's going to, like you see, 14.8. It's going to, you know, it's going to be downloaded from node.js.org. So it's actually going out to the source itself and grabbing that and pulling it in. Now, if you want to use that, right here, it's saying right now the default is labeled node, and that default right now is version 14.8. So and as you download various versions of node, depending on what you're looking for, you will have a list of these. So in order to use a particular version, you just say you just say NVM use. In this case, I want to use the default because it's the only one I have in here, and it's named node, so I'll say node. And what that's going to do now is going to say I'm now using node version 14.8. So now if I run that same command I ran earlier, where I said node -- version, you will see now I'm getting that version back. So node is properly installed, as well as npm -- version. And you will see that I got npm installed too. So now we have node installed into our Linux environment. We got our Linux environment stood up, ready for developing, and things to that nature. Now I want to show you a quick thing real quick before we go to the next section. So let me just clear this out. WSL and WSL2 are pretty cool things you can actually do. If you got, for instance, Visual Studio Code installed, and you're in a particular directory in WSL, and you type in, you know, code space period and hit enter, it's going to open up Visual Studio Code in that particular directory on your Windows side. So you can install Visual Studio Code on Windows just like you would, you know, like you always done, and you can actually use it inside of directories inside your Linux environment. You don't have to kind of re-download a Linux version of the Visual Studio Code to do that. It'll just all work. Same thing with Explorer for file browsing. So for instance, as you can see right now, I'm mounted to my C drive under my Windows account. So this is Windows right here. So if I type in, for instance, explorer.exe space period, what I'm telling Linux is I want to activate this program on the Windows side, and I want to run it here, which is right now mounted to my C. I'm in this particular folder. So if I hit that, you will see that my Windows file system kicks in, and you can see I'm right there. I'm at my C drive under users under my name for my Windows account. This can work just the same thing inside of Linux. So let's go to a Linux environment. Let's go to our Linux environment, for instance. And now, once again, pwd, you can see I'm under my home directory under Cedric Games for Linux. This is a Linux directory. If I run that same command, explorer.exe period space period, it's going to launch Explorer, my file Explorer, but it's going to pull from the Linux directory that I'm currently at, which is this home directory. So if I hit enter here, you can now see that I'm inside of my home directory inside of Linux. So for instance, you can see I'm inside of WSL, Ubuntu 20.04, my home directory. So you can see my home directory under my name. That is awesome because you can now interact with the file system of Linux in a more visual sense and traditional sense from your Windows environment. So Windows and Linux are working side by side seamlessly, and allowing you to do some cool things that weren't really possible before all through Linux. So I just want to kind of show you that. So the next section, we're going to start. We're going to work on Docker, but before that, we're actually going to convert our current installation of WSL to WSL2. When you first install WSL, I guess for probably legacy reasons, it don't automatically convert everything over to WSL2. It starts you at WSL1 and allows you to convert a distro over to WSL2. Don't stress it. It's a piece of cake. Let's work on that, and let's work on that now. So now the next step that we want to do is actually set our distros, our WSL distros, to WSL2. As I said before, when you first install WSL2, with the 2004 update of Windows, by default, even though you have the ability to run WSL2, for your distros, it's actually going to default them to 1. And I'm guessing that's probably for a legacy reason, for developers who were developing in WSL1. But there is a straightforward, kind of easy to use method to kind of update your distros over from 1 to 2, and even set the default version so that any additional distros that you add to your computer, they'll be number 2 or WSL2 by default. So the way you want to do this, you want this in PowerShell, not in the Linux environment, so we can actually close this shell here. And from PowerShell, what you want to first do is kind of get a list of distros that you have currently installed. Currently I only have one, which is Ubuntu 20.04, but in PowerShell it's straightforward. You just have to say WSL -L space -V, and that's basically you run a WSL command. -L is for list, and -V I believe is for verbose. Kind of gives you more information about that install. And when you hit enter, you will see that, well, in this particular computer, we've installed Ubuntu 20.04. It's currently stopped right now because I'm not running it. And right here, the version is 1. So basically what that means is that, yes, you do have a distro of Linux install, but it's not a WSL2 install, it's a WSL1 install. So let's go ahead and update that. So what we do, we just say WSL, you say --set -version. Then you actually put the name, the full name of the distro that's installed. In this case, it's Ubuntu -20.04. So put it just as you see it here, Ubuntu -20.04, and then space 2. So what you're telling WSL is that I want to convert this install of Linux. I want to set that version to version 2. And when you first do this for the first time, you might get this error right here that says that your WSL requires a kernel update, which is fine. Just come here, grab this link right here. Just grab this link right here, copy it, open up a not terminal, but a browser window, and just paste that in there. And basically you're gonna be sent to a Microsoft page where it talks about download this package for your machine. And basically you want to download the latest WSL2 kernel update. In this case, I have an x64 machine, so you just come here, just let it download. It's a real small package, so It should only take a second to download. Once it's downloaded, you just simply run it and just go next. Just accept the defaults, and it's really fast. Like you saw just now. Hit finish, and now you come back to your terminal. Clear this real quick. I'm gonna hit the up key a couple times, and once again, I want to run that same command. I want to say WSL set version, the name of the distro that you're wanting to update or upgrade the version of, which in this case is Ubuntu 20.04, and I want a space, and I want to put the version number, which is 2. This time when I hit enter, now you see I get a different message. It's saying that the conversion is in process. It might take a few minutes. So just kind of let it sit there and let it do its thing, and it shouldn't take very long at all. It just depends on if you already was working in WSL 1, for instance, and you updated to the latest Microsoft update and so forth, and you already had some work that I guess that you were working with inside of WSL 1, I guess that could take longer to convert, because there's more in that distro that you were working on prior. But it should only take a couple minutes and so forth. So I'm just going to let this run for a moment or two, and hopefully it doesn't take too long. Usually it takes like a minute or two. So basically what we're going to do now, we're going to let this kind of get fully converted over, and once that happens, we will then start looking at installing Docker and Visual Studio Code, and that will pretty much wrap up this video. So as you can see now, the conversion is complete. Now if you go back here and do the same thing, WSL-L for list-V for verbose, you should now see that I have my install is complete now. The state is stopped right now. It's not running right now because I'm not running it, but the version updated from 1 to 2. So that means that basically I have updated my distro from version 1 to version 2. Another thing before we go though, another thing that you can do is you can set the default version period. So let's say that from this point forward, anything that you install Linux wise, you want to make sure that those distros that you install are automatically version 2. And the way that you do that, once again, you just run another WSL command. You say WSL set default version, and you just say space 2. And basically what you're saying now is, okay, I want to set the default. Right now the default is 1. I want to set the default period now to version 2. So if I hit enter, it talks about some references, but now from this point forward, you should, if you install, let's say Ubuntu 18.04 for instance, and you want to run, because you need pieces, I guess, you need to run a piece of software or something out of 18.04, whatever your use case is. When you install it into WSL, it's not going to install it as a version 1 distro, and then you have to go through the whole process of converting it. It will just automatically install it as a version 2 install, and you're good to go from there. So what we're going to do next is let's go ahead and install Docker and get Docker stood up on here, and then we'll install Visual Studio Code real quick, and we'll wrap everything up for this video. So let's go ahead and get that started. So let's go ahead and get Docker stood up on your computer so that it can work with your newly set up WSL2 environments as well as your Windows environments. So to get this to work, Docker has built methods and updates to their Docker framework to allow it to run with and communicate and work nicely with WSL2. So if you want Docker to run cleanly, you must have get WSL2 installed, but also you have to make sure that your distros that you have installed on your machine, those are WSL2. When you did the set version and all that, you must make sure that those are version 2, because the Docker desktop will not run cleanly with WSL1. I know there was some kind of workarounds for WSL1, but they weren't really clean. So we're talking about how to get things working the best way possible, the fastest, and so forth. So, like I said, Docker, which is a containerization platform, basically you see developers use it a lot for building out or orchestrating environments for their development, and they can even run this in production. For instance, I run a lot of Docker containers in production for things such as microservices, web servers, even some SQL servers, and so forth. So basically, to get that started on your development machine, really just come out to your browser, and do a search for Docker Desktop. And when you do that, you should get a link here that says Docker Desktop for Mac and Windows. Kind of click that, and what you want to do is it should tell you download Docker for Windows stable, and make sure you grab the right version. Right now this is Mac OS that has a stable and Edge version. You want to go down to Windows and hit stable and download that into your computer. And when you do that, actually this is an older version I did, but we're gonna run, like I said, run everything from here. And I downloaded the DMG, which is a Mac version, by mistake when I was testing all this. But so basically, let the Docker Desktop install to your machine like so, and you can either run it here, or like I said, you can kind of go to your downloads, and then you'll see it there too. It's like I said, Docker Desktop installer. Just double click that and technically close out this window and accept the default stuff real quick. Let me close out some of these things to clean up the window some. And as you can see here, it comes up. It says, "Hey, this is the configuration. You do want to enable WSL to. You just want to keep these two. Technically, I guess you can get rid of that one, but you do want to make sure that that's installed, because it just kind of makes sure that everything is right with your system prior to installing this Docker Desktop." So just hit OK and let it install and unpackage and do everything that it needs to do to kind of get Docker stood up on your system. So as I said, once we get all this installed, the cool thing is that with this new Docker Desktop setup, you can actually run Docker on the Windows side. So if you want to run test things from Windows, you can. Docker and Docker Compose and all that, Docker images, you can do all that on the Windows side, and you can actually run all that through just the Linux side as well. So maybe you're building a system and you're building out a Docker Compose file so that you can actually kind of build out the architecture that your system's going to reside in and so forth. This video is not about Docker development, but it's getting Docker set up on your computer properly so that you can do those kind of things with your system. So just let's give it a few more moments to get fully stood up. It shouldn't take that long, maybe a few minutes, just depending on the speed of your computer and things of that nature. But once it's stood up, you will get a icon in your taskbar that you can utilize to look at different things and so forth. But then you can start running Docker commands right away without problem. So as you can see here, the installation succeeded. We can close. Please forgive me for the disruption in the recording. I forgot that when you actually hit that log out and so forth, that Docker does require a reboot, or I should say log out and to log back in. So of course when I hit the log out button, it literally logged me out, thus disrupting the recording. But nothing broke though. So continuing on, once you reboot your computer or relog back into your computer, I should say, you will see that Docker will kind of kick up saying, tell you that Docker is starting over here in your notification area and that Docker has started. And a window like this should pop up. Basically, you can log in with your account. There'll be a login button here that you can log into your account. And you can go through these Docker tutorials if you want to. Since I know how to use it, I don't really need it, so I'm just going to skip the tutorial. and in the bottom here is telling you that Docker is running. So this is basically your Docker desktop. So I can actually close that. And if you look here in your taskbar, it's kind of hard to see, but right here it's a little white icon. Why? Yeah, I don't know why they made that white, but it tells you that Docker desktop is running. And if you actually click it, there's some things you can do with it, and you can restart it and things like that, enable Kubernetes and things of that nature. But it's just basically that you know that Docker is running. So Docker is fully stood up on your computer. It runs within Windows as well as with Linux. So let me pull up a Linux terminal. So to prove this works, we can do. I'm in Linux now. I'm in my 20.04 environment, my Linux environment, and just so that you know, I can just say, you know, I'm gonna change directory to just into a Linux directory, just so you can see it. If I do something like clear this out first. If I say Docker dash version, you will see that Docker is indeed running on my Linux environment. If I come to PowerShell, which is my Windows environment, and say do the same command, docker dash version, I should get the same number, because the Windows and Linux environment are sharing the Docker framework as far as resources, images, and things of that nature. So since this is a new install of Docker, if I say something like Docker images, I should get back nothing because I have no images. Same thing on the Windows side of the house. On the Windows side of things, if I say Docker images, it should come back empty basically, because I had not pulled any Docker images. So let's just pull one so we can kind of show it. So I say Docker pull, I don't know, let's say Apache HTTPD. So I'm gonna pull the Apache image from Docker, and you see that Docker is now going out to Docker Hub, pulling that particular images and getting it all set up for me so I can actually use it. So now if I say Docker images, for instance, again, you will see now I have one image, which is my HTTPD image, which is the Apache web server, and this is in Linux right now. This is all running inside of the Linux environment. Now let's do that same thing over here on Windows. But since I already pulled the Apache image from Linux, I should be able to see that image show up on the Windows side of things too. So if I say again Docker images, there you go. You see that HTTPD latest, and this is the Apache image that I pulled from the Linux side of the house into our Docker environment, and that's available now for us to use. I can also use that same image on the Windows side. Let's do one now. Let's do a Docker pull. Let's just say MySQL, MySQL. Let's just pull the latest version of MySQL from Docker Hub. And now I'm doing this pull from the Windows side. Last time I did it from the Linux side. This time I'm doing it from the Windows side. If I hit enter now, it's gonna go out there, and just as always, it's gonna go out to Docker Hub. Pull that image with MySQL, get everything downloaded real quick, and get the image ready so that I can actually use it within like a Docker Compose file and things like that. So as you can see here, everything's ready. So now if I say Docker, clear this out so I'm clear. If I say Docker images now, I should have two. I should have my HTTPD, which is my Apache web server, and also my MySQL that I pulled from Windows. I had pulled this one from Linux. I pulled MySQL from Windows, but it's available on both sides of the house. So if I come over to Linux now, and let's clear this out some, and now if I say Docker images, to kind of get a list of images, as you can see, the images are shared amongst both environments. That in itself is kind of cool. So you can actually run all your Docker Compose or Docker, whatever, builds and all that kind of stuff on either side of the house, and it will work fine. Docker Compose is installed as well. So you say Docker Compose dash version, for instance. You will see that Docker Compose is already installed, because of course that's kind of bundled in with Docker Desktop. So you don't have to go out there separately and do like a some kind of install using Linux or anything like that to kind of get Docker Compose into your environment. That's already there, ready for us to roll. So the next step that we're going to do is let's go ahead and get Visual Studio Code installed real quick. And Visual Studio Code is a simple, just go to code.visualstudio.com. Go out to the website. By default, it should be already here, ready for you to download. But if you do click this down key, you can see that you can download a particular. If you're looking for a particular version, there's Mac OS, Windows 64 version. You can download the Insiders version, which is like the latest and greatest, but it might have some bugs in it because it's not the stable version yet. Linux, you got the dev file and things like that. If you go to other downloads too, though, and especially with the Windows side of things, like I said, you got the Linux installs for if you're trying to install Visual Studio inside of Linux as well as Mac, but we're talking about Windows today. So here you got the 64-bit version, which is most computers for the most part. There's 64 version today. If you need the 32-bit version, let's say you're running on, for instance, the Surface Pro X, and you can run that if you wanted to, the 32-bit version of, because you can't run the 64-bit version on the Surface Pro X because the Pro X is an ARM processor, and ARM doesn't understand at least 64-bit yet. It is an interpreter that does understand 32, but there's also an ARM version now, an ARM version. So on the Surface Pro X, for instance, I wouldn't run the 32-bit version now. A couple months ago, we had to run the 32-bit version, but now Microsoft has released the ARM version of Visual Studio Code, so you can just run just the ARM version, which will be better for you overall for that, for that particular computer. But right now I'm just using my regular Windows laptop, which is a 64-bit version. So I'm just going to hit download for Windows. It'll come here and it will just download it. It'll take a second to download. And once that's finished, you can just hit, just click it to open it up. And just accept the agreement, for instance. And I just kind of set all the defaults. What I do this though, I do add these options here so I can open it from the context menu, from the Explorer, and I can also register the code as editors for supported files. So I will get that started. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hit next, install, and give that a second to fully install for you. And once it's finished, your environment will be pretty much set up. And then you go ahead and launch it. Hit finish, and it'll come up. And you might get some recommendations from Visual Studio Code. Like for one, it's just talk about this remote extension for WSL. Definitely install that. And if this doesn't come up for you, you can simply come here and search for remote Microsoft Remote extension for remote-WSL. It should give you an entry for that. But you definitely want this installed because this allows you to run your Visual Studio Code from your Windows install, which is this install right here, and kind of go into your Linux environment and allow you to do coding there. So you don't have to kind of install two versions. You don't have to install a Linux version and a Windows version. You can just have your Windows version and code in both areas. So you definitely want to install that there and get that going. And then we kind of just close this out. And now you have in Windows, you now have your Visual Studio Code stood up, as well as Docker, as well as WSL, WSL2. You have that all configured. So now you pretty much have a awesome development environment that you can pretty much develop anything in, like a lot of your web apps and so forth. The way I kind of do it is Flutter and React Native. I tend to do that on the Windows side of things because I gotta have Android Studio installed and all that kind of stuff. Now you can do that in the Linux environment as well. I just know there's more steps that I didn't care for. So what I kind of do is I install, if I'm doing any kind of work in Flutter or React Native to build mobile apps, I tend to do that on my Windows side, since both environments can talk to one another. And then for like the APIs that I build, like my Express APIs, if I'm building Angular apps, if I'm building React apps, any kind of web application, PHP, Python Flask applications and things like that. I tend to do all that in my WSL environment and code out of Visual Studio Code. So you now have a awesome development environment that you can work in both Windows. So like I said, if you're doing things like, .NET development, you can install Visual Studio. Not code, we already got code installed, but just a full-blown IDE of Visual Studio on your Windows side, and you can work on .NET applications. And if you're working on like open source software, PHP, React applications, Angular applications, um, anything, Vue and all that kind of stuff. You can do all that stuff inside of your Linux environment with relative ease now because you got the best of both worlds sitting on your computer using the resources that's there for you to use. So that is that. And we now have an awesome development environment that is worthy. It's a worthwhile and worthy development environment that sits in Windows. So you don't necessarily have to have a Mac or a Linux machine to have an awesome environment for development. We went through all the steps that it takes to get one stood up right here. So before I close this particular video out, I do want to kind of show you the integration of Visual Studio Code with your WSL environment. So let's go ahead and open up a terminal for that. And we got PowerShell over here for that, and as well as let's go to Ubuntu 2004. So we'll have a Linux. We have our Linux environment running. So let's go ahead and change directory to my Linux environment. So I say pwd, for instance. Again, you can see I'm home, and let's say I want to make a directory called just projects. Say it lets you now see I got projects, cd into projects, for instance. So let's say I have some code in this folder, for instance, that I want to code, I want to work with it. Now that I have Visual Studio stood up and everything, I can simply say code dot, hit enter, and as you see, Visual Studio pops up, and you can actually see in here that I'm inside my WSL Ubuntu 2004 environment inside my projects folder. There's nothing in that folder because we haven't installed anything, but you can see that I'm now able to code and make directories and all that kind of stuff directly inside of my my Linux environment through my Visual Studio Code. So for instance, I create a folder called test folder, for instance, and now if I come out here, and again, if I say like explore explorer.exe and enter, you can see that folder that I created inside my Visual Studio environment is now showing up in my file explorer. So as I was basically showing, there is tight integration between WSL and Windows, and the ability to manipulate files and so forth in your WSL environment and with the file explorer as well as Visual Studio Code. Because I just kind of wanted to kind of showcase that real quick before closing out and so forth. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it and doing these kind of videos. So if you enjoyed it and want more videos like this on other topics, please let me know. Drop a comment in the comment section, and please support the channel by liking the video, hit that subscribe button, and hit the bell icon so you'll know when more content is being pushed to my channel. Again, thank you for starting this journey with me with this new channel. I do hope that you enjoy everything thus far, and I will catch you on the next one. So until next time, as always, stay geeky, stay techy.